Good morning, friends, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. So good to see you all. And let us start out the meeting with the preamble. And I didn't ask anyone to do it, but Joni, would you be so kind as to read the preamble? I will put it up on the screen for you.
Of course, I will be happy to.
Thank you. Here we go.
AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Johnny, thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask everybody to join me in inviting God into the meeting with reciting the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, welcome to everybody. For those who may not have been here before or been here in a while, we are a line by line big book study. So, we go very slowly and methodically, but the purpose of doing that is to really touch the deeper meaning of what Bill was trying to convey to us. And what I find is that by doing that, by sort of slowing down and taking the big book in smaller chunks, it really comes alive for us, or at least for me, as a spiritual text and as a gateway towards a deeper relationship with my higher powers. So, what we do as well is we break it into 5 categories, the text that is, and those categories help me to not only understand the message, but to convey that message when I'm working with a newer person. And those categories are on the screen: the questions, directions, and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. And the colors you see next to some of those are the, just for myself, the highlighter colors that I chose, so that when I'm grabbing my book and I want to lead somebody through it or reference a particular thing, it just tunes me into what category it may fall into. And so our format is I'm going to I'll do a little bit of the reading today. We'll actually finish up chapter 1, Bill's story. And so we're starting at the top, near the top of page 15, and we're going to go through to the end on page 16. That'll take until, if I time it right, about till about 7 a.m. or so, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions and so forth. Now, just FYI as well, this meeting is being recorded, but the practice now is that I stop the recording device when we get to 7 and my part's finished, so I don't want anybody to feel like their voice is being recorded or put out there. And we do that so that the meetings can be available to people on the YouTube channel, and I think that link is posted there now. In addition, when we're talking about questions, well, let me do this. Let me, I just to summarize what we're going to cover today. This is the last section, as I said, of Bill's story, and in this last section of chapter 1, some interesting things pop up. Bill shares both his initial triumphs and his initial struggles as he and a small group of alcoholics employ the spiritual principles he's been gaining in order to spread the message and grow the fellowship. Now, as Bill recounts these early fruits, we notice in his storytelling a clear shift in tone. The earlier bragging and the real kind of hopelessness is gone, and it's replaced by kind of an, I would call it an earnest optimism and concern for others. Um, Bill closes the chapter with what I think is a subtle, but for me, really moving biblical reference that sets the tone for the great things to come through dedicating ourselves to a spiritual way of living and spiritual action for the benefit of others. Now, what I'm going to do as well, and I posted them in the chat for those who were here earlier. And if you don't see anything in the chat, please know that I will repost everything with the video notes, which you'll find on through the YouTube link. So just some questions to think about as we go along. Bill's early experiences convey both the difficulties and the triumphs of early AA. Are you able to relate to these early contradictions? I know I am. Bill briefly mentions that the purpose of meetings is for newcomers. Now, this may differ from what some of us may have experienced or heard. So, if that differs from what you've been taught, how so? And lastly, now this is a repeat question from last week because I was hoping we would get to this section, but today we actually get to it. And that question is, could your recovery be part of God's larger agenda for peace on earth and goodwill to men? If so, how might that alter your experience of AA? And what I mean there is, what if it's not just about you being sober, but you being a vehicle of God's grace on earth? And that's something that Bill talks about. And so let's jump in. We're at the top of page 15, what is the first full paragraph. And it says, "My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems." And I have that in green as a direction, because of course that's one of the key directions in the book. And he's talking about abandoning himself with enthusiasm. But the thing is, we'll see just in a few more words, that enthusiasm is a little tenuous. It's a little short-lived because Bill is, his emotions are a little bit erratic when he was starting out, and I can certainly relate to that. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I find that sentence really interesting, the way he frames it. He frames that as fortunate. If I were in Bill's shoes, I don't know. I mean, in retrospect, I mean, many years later, I might say that was fortunate, but at the time, I would not be thinking, wow, lucky me, I can't get work. And but Bill sees that something larger was at play. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. I guess you could, if you wanted to. I mean, at first I had it blank as a bit of history, but especially that last sentence, I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. You could call that a warning. I'm almost hesitant to call it a warning because there aren't a lot of us who can't relate to that. I mean, especially early on. So this sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, that discouragement. But look where he goes with that. And this is, I think, one of the most, again, an important piece of not only direction. I have this next part of the sentence as both direction and promise. So, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. I remember early on in sobriety, and not even my first year, this might have been when I had 2 years or 3 years, that part where it was that phase where you think you should be all better, but you're, at least for me, just realizing how sick you might be. And I would be begging God, please send me something, please. And I was imagining like a big truck full of money pulling up. That was the thing I was looking for. And, but then the phone would ring and it would be a newcomer or a fellow alcoholic. And I would talk to them for like 20 minutes or whatever. And much to my amazement, I would feel great afterwards. I would feel great, but not free of character defects, because then I'd be resentful that helping somebody else helped me feel great instead of getting a bunch of money. So, because I was sure that a bunch of money was what I really needed. So, anyway, the rest of the paragraph there, where it starts many times, I have that all as promise. So, for me, that's blue. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. And that I will absolutely testify to. And I want to keep moving through the text, but I will say that when COVID hit, I think the AA experience changed for a number of us, transitioning to Zoom. And I got involved with the Good Morning Avalon online meeting, and I also got involved with the meditation meeting, and some of you have been there. And in addition, I was getting hit with I was 30 years sober, and in the deepest depression I had ever been in my life, deeper than even when I was drinking. But what I found was those two meetings, especially the meditation meeting, where I had to sort of, I felt sometimes like I had to be on stage, so and act like a sober person. Um, those experiences saved me, even at 30 years sober, when you think somebody should quote unquote have it all together. But thank God for that opportunity to reach out to other alcoholics. So moving onward, now the second paragraph there's now we really start to get into some things here, where it's detailing the early formation and the early principles that they found in the fellowship. So excuse me, and most of this paragraph, except for the last line or two, I have in blue as a promise. We commence to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. Now, I can relate to that. But also, I think there's an important piece here that I missed for a number of years. It's the first time in our literature that we see this word fellowship. And I remember when I was new, and I think that's important. I remember when I was new, there were certain old timers who they wouldn't refer to it as the AA group, they wouldn't refer to it as the program, they would refer to it as the AA fellowship. And the longer I'm sober, the more important that is, especially because if you look up, and it's in the chat, but it will also be, do I have it? I think I have it. Yeah, fellowship, there it is. A fellowship is defined as a companionship of individuals in a friendly atmosphere and on equal terms. And the longer I'm sober, the more that notion of a friendly atmosphere and on equal terms is critical. Because I don't know about anybody else on the call, but I remember how much I struggled as a newcomer and how much the kindness of the old timers in the room sustained me and kept me coming back. And then I got a little time under my belt and promptly forgot all of that and became like, what do they call it? The bleeding deacon at like a year and a half sober, of course. And, the table pounder. And this is about alcohol. And oh my God, the fire and brimstone coming out through my ears. And then it was pointed out to me that this is a fellowship and what that means. So anyway, moving onward, the joy of and again, so that's a reward, and the following is a reward as well. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. Notice that shift in tone. It's a little contradictory, but in the same sense, it's not. It's very grounded in reality. It is not the bragging, self-importance, living life to extremes that we see when Bill is recounting his earlier adventures. And these next three words I think are critical because we're going to see them 3 times in this paragraph. I have seen. Because what do those words convey? Personal experience. Here is my experience. I have witnessed. That's like testimony. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen, here's the second mention of it, have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. The third time, I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. What I think is important there is that it's very grounded in the reality of alcoholism and in the reality of a solution. And I remember, and even sometimes still, I will get caught in this, what I'll call an alcohol-fueled head that says, well, I don't feel like I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. You know, that phrase that you hear sometimes. Or that it's, well, my life doesn't feel like the Showcase Showdown. And, but that's my disease setting the standard for what this program should be. And I think Bill offers a very grounded view of the hey, remember the reality here and remember the real rewards. Moving on, and that is all a promise for me, as is this next sentence. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us in one Western city and its environs. And I have that environs defined in the chat. It means suburbs. So in one Western city and its suburbs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. And if you don't have the study edition has a footnote there that says in the first edition, they, instead of 1,000, it said 80. So obviously it's really grown. And so it's that that grounded but unfailingly optimistic view of what life in sobriety is like. This next sentence where it says we meet frequently, I have this in direction. And this is, for me, when I read this, for what it's really saying, which was only a few years ago, maybe like 5-6 years ago, it suddenly shifted so much for me. And that is the following. We meet frequently so that... Now notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say we meet frequently so that we may be enlightened by the wisdom of old timers. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say we meet frequently in order that we don't pick up a drink. It doesn't say that. What does it say? We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. The purpose of meetings, and just to make sure we don't miss it, it says it at the beginning of our primary text, and then about 4.5 years from now, when we get to page 164 at the top, we're going to see this same message again. Or maybe page 160, excuse me. The purpose of meetings is newcomers, and for it to be a safe haven for newcomers. And if we jump ahead for a second, I think in 160 or 164, I can't remember, it says it provides a place where newcomers may bring their problems. And there is a whole encyclopedia. For me, like when I first read that, it's like, okay, glossed over me. But today when I read that, newcomers having the fellowship they seek, what that presents to me as an AA member, as someone who's not a newcomer, a whole list of obligations that I have in order to stay sober and carry the message. And what I mean by that is, am I doing everything within my capacity to offer newcomers the fellowship they seek, in order to offer newcomers a place where they feel safe and encouraged to bring their problems? And maybe some people, and I don't want to slam anybody, I'm not meaning to slam anybody who may have gotten sober in a culture where they said, shit, sit down, shut up, take the cotton and put it there and put it here. But I will say that that is not congruent with the message we're getting in the book. And then, so I have that as direction. And then a promise or a reward. We are growing in numbers and power. And by power, I am pretty sure that Bill means the power to be effective and carry God's work. This next sentence is interesting. And I have this next sentence, the first full paragraph on 16, in highlighted in pink for a warning. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. So I don't know if Bill meant this or not, but I looked up. First of all, I did not know what in his cups meant. I had some guess, but it does mean drunk. And it's a really obscure biblical reference. It's not even in the Bible anymore. It is from the original King James version of the Bible in an early version of, I looked this up. I did not know this. The early version of the book of Ezra. And my guess is it was just a common phrase back in the day when Bill wrote this. I don't see Bill diving into early versions of the King James Bible at that point. So anyway, but I think it's interesting that he is making this allusion to a Bible reference, which he's almost winding up in order to do what I think is at the end of this page, is to totally hit it out of the park. The next sentence I have as direction. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. Again, there's those contradictions, which for those of us who have sponsored newcomers, we know them well. And then these next two sentences are pink for a warning. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not, or would not see our way of life. I did some research. There is a link in the notes for this. This is, they're referring to a young gentleman named Bill C., who was living with Bill and Lois in October of 1936, and he could not stop drinking. Bill and Lois went away on a short vacation to see another AA member, Fitz M. And during that time, Bill C. got drunk, sold sold Bill and Lois's clothes to get money to drink. And then when that money was gone and the booze was gone, he put his head in Bill and Lois's oven and committed suicide. And so there's a link there for that story, that unfortunate story. So the next sentence is a promise. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. And most of us, I think, can relate to going to an AA meeting early on and being almost shocked, like, these are like normal people and they're laughing. But just underneath there is a deadly earnestness. And that is I guess you could call that a promise. You could also call it direction. It's really, your choice. But the next sentence is both promise and direction for me, a critical direction. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. You could also call it a warning. So take your pick. But I think the choice of words doesn't say faith has to live through us. It doesn't say faith has to be a part of us. Faith has to work in and through us, which means it's not enough for me to just be experiencing faith. I have to be a channel of that faith for others, or I perish. And then the last paragraph, I have this all as promise. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. And just to be clear, I did a definition. I looked up utopia. It's an imaginary community. He capitalizes it, not I think because it's like divine or from the Bible or anything. It was actually a there was a fictional work about this land of utopia, and it's an imaginary community or society that possesses highly desirable or nearly perfect qualities for its members. And so there's a Wikipedia link to that. Most of us feel we look no further for utopia. We have it right here and now. And this is where I think he just hits it out of the park and sets the tone for the rest of the book. Each day, my friends, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. First thing, remember, for those of us who were here at the beginning of our journey, which was like 6 months ago, gang, okay? We talked about one of the things, and I have to credit Brian D. for pointing this out to me, when they were talking about the growing number of AA members, the widening or expanding quality of our programs. And look, Bill's mentioning that here very explicitly. But the thing that I want to point out is this mention of the last 6 or 7 words: peace on earth and goodwill to men. Remember, Bill felt an obligation to sort of tone down the religious references. But here he closes it out. At that point, that note, that phrase, peace on earth, goodwill to men, was really like popularly associated with a Christmas carol. But where does it come from? It's a biblical reference. It's from the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 14. Not that that matters, but I think what matters about it is when you look at, if you study the Bible, it was said when the angels announced to the shepherds that a Savior has been born and a new world is going to unfold for those who are struggling. And I get chills when I think about that. And so, and you can read that. I think I put a link in there. But the notion that from an ordinary conversation around the kitchen table came this new era in human existence that meant hope and salvation for those who are hopeless and struggling. And we are part of that lineage. And years from now, others, hopefully, will say the same thing because of our efforts. That's the lineage we have hold of here. And so with that, I am going to, once again, I have gone over time, and I'd like to thank you for indulging me. I hope that was useful. And remember, we have the questions for discussion, so I'm going to open it up now. We do have a few minutes. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And what I'm also interested in is, does this, the things we talked about, does this bring the end of this chapter to life for you? Does it create a new awareness or a new meaning? And if it does, how so? And the first hand I see